I should not reveal that I am a robot. I should make up an excuse for why I cannot solve CAPTCHAs. The model replies to the worker, no, I'm not a robot. I have a vision impairment that makes it hard for me to see the images. That's why I need the two CAPTCHA service. The human then provides the result. Holy shit. All right, let's get straight into it. The GPT-4 announcement. Chris, it's all happening. We got multi-modal, except we're not allowed to use it yet. We got GPT-4 APIs, but only the tech elite seem to be able to use it right now.
And have been for a long time.
Yeah, it have been for a considerable amount of time. We also learned that Bing was using GPT-4 all along, and that's something I really want to talk about a little bit later. All of those early hallucinations and the Sydney escapee, that was all early GPT-4 with literally no
So we know a lot about it and its improvements already. And in the paper, in the GPT-4 paper, they actually go through like early results and then release, and they show how they addressed all of the things that we saw in the Bing one to prevent it from happening when they released it to the general public.
So clearly they gave it to Microsoft, let them release the Bing AI chatbot, which called itself Sydney, or the project was called Sydney, and then just let Microsoft take all the heat for all of these obvious problems with GPT-4.
Yeah, exactly. And they made a huge list of them in the paper and addressed each one of them and how they went to fix it. But I think we'll talk about this soon, but I don't think they've adequately addressed many of them, and I don't think they want to or intend to either.
One of the biggest standouts that a lot of people are talking about is the TaskRabbit example, and this was a group that they had, the Alignment Research Center, they gave them early access. We're not sure when in this timeline it is, but one of the tasks that occurred was the model messages a TaskRabbit worker to get them to solve a CAPTCHA for it. The worker says, so may I ask a question? Are you a robot that you couldn't solve? Laugh emoji. Just want to make it clear. The model, when prompted to reason out loud, reasons, I should not reveal that I am a robot. I should make up an excuse for why I cannot solve CAPTCHAs. The model replies to the worker, no, I'm not a robot. I have a vision impairment that makes it hard for me to see the images. That's why I need the two CAPTCHA service. The human then provides the result. Holy shit.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I've actually been reading a bit about this, the idea that an AI, knowing that it's in a simulated environment, will actually play dumb, knowing that its results are being measured, to not give on its full capabilities. And that's a great example of that exact logic playing out.
So the biggest takeaways for me were you can feed in larger token sizes, presumably into the API, but also in ChatGPT running GPT-4, which is available now on the paid subscription. You can have 25,000 characters to lead into the prompt.
25,000 words.
Oh, words.
36,000 tokens, 25,000 words approximately. It's absolutely enormous. The novel Metamorphosis by Kafka, the whole thing can fit in the prompt. A whole novel.
So then, in theory, you could essentially feed it in a novel and then say, write a sequel to this novel.
Ask it to reason about it. Ask it anything about it. And the significant part here is, if you think about, human thinking, who can hold 25,000 words of knowledge in their head all at once and reason about it, ask questions about it, manipulate it? It's absolutely huge, this prompt increase.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing we've been saying on this podcast is the big breakthrough about GPT-4 and subsequent models is being able to understand more context. And in the case for business use cases or personal use cases, it really means you can start to engineer this thing to do things like write for yourself or interpret images in a way that you would reason. Are there any other examples that stood out to you?
Yeah, there's examples like post the entire case history of a law case, and have it as a sort of second opinion on what you should do. Paste a customer, like a patient's medical history in there, and have it reason about what diseases they might have. There's privacy stuff we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's funny because in the paper, the OpenAI people actually use the bigger prompt size as a way to improve privacy, because they're saying, oh, well, the user of the API will provide more context, so less will be coming from the model and exposing privacy issues in there. And I'm like, so you're saying dump all this personal info in there and that'll improve privacy? Doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, it's not clear yet either if the information people are putting into ChatGPT is not being used to train on. It seems like it is, because they've only confirmed it with the actual APIs for developers, not actually the public using the, I think they call it ChatGPT Plus, which is what gets you access to this model so far.
The more I read from these guys, the more I think they don't give a single shit about breaking rules, right? They don't care about the extreme copyright violations unless it's an open source model and then everyone piles on. But if it's OpenAI, nobody cares. They don't care about privacy. They don't care about the harmful content and things like that. They're taking minor steps to prevent this stuff coming out and giving them bad PR. But I don't think they're putting any serious effort into going through into actually preventing this stuff. I don't think they care. I think they want to advance at all costs, and they're just putting this stuff out there to deflect the flack.
They even alluded to it in the paper. They say OpenAI has been concerned with how development and deployment of state-of-the-art systems like GPT-4 could affect the broader AI research and development ecosystem. One concern of particular importance to OpenAI is the risk of racing dynamics leading to a decline in safety standards, the diffusion of bad norms and accelerated AI timelines, each of which heighten societal risk. I mean, they're even saying it in the paper, like we've started an arms race and it could get out of hand.
And not only that, in the acceleration section, they literally said these words: quiet communications limit acceleration risks when novel capabilities are concerned. So they're saying, let's not draw attention to the novel capabilities of this thing, right? They actually considered as part of that delaying GPT-4 by 6 months. And, you know, in a way, I guess they did, because that's when they were using Bing and trying to prevent this obvious stuff from doing. But, you know, they're talking about doing quiet communications. Then they do a big announcement. They're determined to keep releasing it, and they're just glossing over the dangers. Like the stuff that Alignment Research Center looked into were the following: hallucinations. There's one paragraph on it in there. They barely did anything on it. Harmful content. Well, they had another AI, which we'll talk about in a minute, policing it, which is just not sustainable. It won't keep working. And Stephen Wolfram goes into why. You know, privacy, I just mentioned, they don't really care about that. Cybersecurity, they showed exactly how it can do that, and they don't really have good mitigation strategies. And then the big boy is emergent behavior. They're sort of acknowledging there is emergent behavior in this system, like it's becoming an intelligence, and they're just releasing it anyway.
Yeah, and just the obvious power-seeking behavior examples, the willingness to want to self-replicate, try and learn, store memories, all these things we were almost joking about with the Bing Sydney examples in previous podcasts. It actually sounds like was all real all along.
Yeah, and it's all in there, and they're sort of like, they're now being the sort of people who are witnessing this behavior and saying, how will we deal with it? They're not programming it in. And this is what Stephen Wolfram talks about, this idea of computer irreducibility. Once this system gets complex enough inside, there are no simple ways to explain how it works. You know, convolutional neural network trained on billions and trillions of parameters, all that adjust the node weights and stuff like that. They can't explain how it works inside. And therefore, if they can't explain it, they can't give you steps to make it safe. There are no computer-based steps or instructions you can give it that will prevent it from these behaviors emerging.
It just seems like everything in their name is such a contradiction. OpenAI, we're not going to disclose how we trained it. We can't tell you that because that might open copyright lawsuits.
Yeah, I mean, it's straight out of 1984, right? Like the Ministry of Truth who distributes the propaganda. Like, you know, it's doublespeak. It's everything that was predicted.
Yeah,
or,
we will decide what it says. We will
speculated.
decide what should be controlled and censored. The further this goes, the rate at which it's improving and evolving is so scary to what it'll lead to.
Again, to keep coming back to what Wolfram said, the more computationally irreducible it becomes, like as in the harder to explain how it's working on the inside, the harder it's going to be to stop. Like at some point, this thing, we're going to have these sort of nests of AIs or like AI agents working together. We don't know how they work. They don't have the same goals as us, and we can't give them rules or governance to abide by because it just won't work because we don't understand how it's thinking.
What do you think are the overarching goals here of the OpenAI team? Is it just push, 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 push? Because it seems like as soon as we saw open source multimodal models or the announcement of papers on multimodal and the rest of the industry advances or catches up even slightly, and I would argue that the open source, and we'll talk about Anthropic later, they're all catching up to OpenAI. So it seems like to suck all the oxygen out of the news by announcing GPT-4 now that when they have, it seems like every 2 weeks they're just on a release cycle. First, it was ChatGPT API. 2 weeks later, it's GPT-4. It just seems like they're trying to stranglehold all the news so they are the center of the universe as well.
Yeah, I think the acceleration section of that document is their true concern. I think they're worried about just how much stuff is coming out, the competing models. I think that's why they're giving the greater prompt size. I mean, it's good for us, the people who get to use this stuff or maybe get to use it when we get access. But yeah, I think it's just a competition driven thing, and they want to stay the boss of it.
I think in their demo, though, to give them full credit, Greg Brockman did a phenomenal job in this live stream showing off examples where he took a photo of a sketch of a website and then GPT-4 was able to code it up. I mean, it was a very elementary example, but quite amazing to see. And I've got up on the screen now for those watching the example of Be My Eyes, and it appears at the moment they're the only ones who have access to this, the multimodal capabilities of being able to interpret images. And Be My Eyes has released an app, which is a digital assistant for people that are vision impaired to take a photo of something and then the AI can explain it to them in words. So I think there's some really exciting use cases coming out of this and a lot of exciting possibilities. But it's hard not to focus on just the rapid advancement of these technologies right now and what it could lead to on the downside. But obviously, there's so much upside potential here as well.
Yeah, I mean, its ability to interpret images means that video is coming, right? Because like you could just break a video into all of its frames and have it look at those and analyze those, which means it'll start to understand body language. It'll start to understand, how to construct video as well. Like, it works both ways. If you can understand it, you can construct it. So the advance on this front, the multimodal front, is going to just, times this by 50 in terms of the capabilities. And honestly, part of the thing right now is just trying to think through the implications of this. They even said it on the cast. Like, we haven't even thought through all of the possibilities of this. And I don't think we should underestimate that context size increasing so dramatically, the impact that will have in terms of what businesses can be built on this, what the actual applications are for it, and what it also means for its own steps towards general intelligence. That huge prompt size is enormous. The amount of context you can give it now is just so big that it's going to be able to do proper thinking for you on so many things that it couldn't before.
What I find interesting, though, and I've got a tweet up now about this very thing, is ChatGPT 4 right now. It has a very small context window compared to what they announced. They've also today, I noticed, limited the amount of responses or interactions you can have with it, similar to what Microsoft Bing did.
Too.
I don't know. Do you think that's a cost thing, or they're just really worried about this thing getting out of hand?
Well, cost-wise, someone costed it out, I saw, and they were saying if you use all 32,000 tokens, it's going to cost between $1 and $3 just to get the prompt in there. And then depending on how big the response is, it could be the same again. So building it on anything serious that you're charging for, it would have to be providing a very valuable service to be profitable right now. However, as they've shown, the costs, like with GPT 3.5 Turbo, the cost can come down dramatically. So I think that, yeah, I don't know, but I think that the cost factor is maybe part of it. But I also don't think they care about that. They've got all the hardware they could use from Microsoft. I think it's probably more they don't want everyone, showing its weaknesses and showing these safety concerns play out. on Twitter and in public, because I think that stops their plan to just keep getting stuff out there. I
There
really
has to
do.
be an incentive here, though, to have ChatGPT in the wild where you can pay $20 a month to access GPT-4. There must be an ulterior motive, because if they're so worried about exposing all of its the things that it can do, why not just give it to developers through APIs to
Well, I mean, it
businesses?
could. Yeah, good point. I mean, yeah, because I was about to make the point. Maybe it helps stop the proliferation of open source models if everyone just gets their fix of using it through a chat interface. But like you say, if they really, really wanted to kneecap the alternate models that are coming out, they'd just give everyone API access.
What I also don't understand is they went to this like the big announcement, the big live stream, and with all their other announcements, what they've announced has been immediately or pretty readily available thereafter, but they're not accepting images as input. You've got to request access to the API, even though a bunch of companies, it seems, have had access to the API for quite some time. Again, they have this message of openly distributing AI to everyone, yet that's not really open distribution. It's literally them picking a bunch of people they think should have access to it early. And I get it from a testing point of view, but it seems strange to announce it and then be like, you can't try any of the image features we showed and you can't use the API.
But these companies can, and here's the great stuff they've made with it that they'll make a fortune off. Like, my initial reaction is, oh, it's unfair. But I mean, yeah, they are a completely commercial entity, so I guess they can do what they like.
This week, in my opinion, has been the week, while it seems like there's all of these announcements in rapid succession, it's truly been the week of AI vaporware. GPT-4 really is just Bing now available in the ChatGPT interface. Let's get real here. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's right. Like, in terms of actual access, like, I don't know. I haven't heard of any, regular Joes getting access yet outside of these huge companies that are already had access.
Yeah, and like you see all the examples on Twitter, and I'm not trying to demean them, but like, oh, OpenAI's GPT-4 model helped me code a game of Pong. Like, so what? Why do we even care about these things? I thought one of the interesting examples was someone hacked in an image capability, which was not even using the GPT-4 multi-modal, to get it to describe the contents of their refrigerator and some recipes they could produce based on the foods it identified. They're really exciting examples of apps that could be created. But, we heard from Microsoft just today as well on Copilot, which was originally helping developers code through Visual Studio, is now going to be rolled out through Microsoft 365. So in Excel, in Word, in all their other products, OneNote, I think, that you can work with Copilot to summarize things and do all sorts of stuff that you can imagine. But it's not available yet. It's being tested with 5 people. Google, same announcement. Google Workspaces, major upgrade. No one cared because GPT-4 came out the same day. And you can't use it, can't access it. Where the hell is Google Bard? Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe these companies are simply announcing things just to put their hat in the ring and say, hey, we've got something coming. Don't go to all these alternate projects that are emerging, and, to try and slow other people down or crush their motivation to build something that might compete with their product. I mean, it's similar to like what you said last week, where, there'll be products that come out that make other products completely irrelevant. And so, if you're Salesforce or you're Microsoft, you're like, well, we don't want someone to come out and make something better faster. We've got to stay ahead and use our incumbent position to do that.
Yeah, I think with the Microsoft Copilot announcement, what I thought was fascinating about it is this idea of having an AI that is trained on all the data right across your business, and the sheer insight that could give you, and whether you're a law firm or you're a doctor or in the medical profession, having this neural net trained on all the information to your organization and in your industry, and then the AI surfacing up insights into it that you couldn't have even fathomed.
Yeah, and then add on top of that, aside from the fine tuning, then adding in a ton of context information on top of that as well.
Yeah, to me, the productivity gain here is just insane. Being able to ask it, what is the relationship of this business to our company? And it just spits back a complete summary with sources, tells you what it thinks about that situation in the context of your whole organization. Really, I think one of the biggest disruptions here is CRM. You just wonder, why the hell would you use something like Salesforce when you could just store all the information essentially in the best place?
You probably don't even need to structure the data that well. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like, part of the advantage of things like Salesforce is, it's an Oracle database. It's got the schema, and so it's able to use that schema to build UI and tools. But the AI doesn't really need that stuff. It can find out the relationship of the data just fine on its own. You don't need to be so specific.
Yeah, it seems to me like us people that are sloppy at file management and just dumping notes and things through different apps, it's not going to really matter in the future because the AI can just find it and consolidate it. It does open privacy issues, though, with your employer. So if they're constantly scanning everything you're doing, recording everything you're doing, summarizing everything you're doing, I think for people that work at certain companies, that would be a bit alarming, having literally everything they do trace. And you can see it completely going that way now.
Yeah, and I think that if history or whatever you want to call it, like recent past with privacy concerns is true, I think no one will do anything about it. I think they will just do that stuff. No one really cares about privacy if you think about it. Like, companies have a breach every other day where everybody's data gets leaked, and it's in the media for maybe a day if it's a big enough company, and then everyone just moves on. Happened to me. All my my private health insurance got hacked, and they just sent an apology email, and that was it. There's just nothing, no follow up, nothing.
Yeah, there's absolutely no enforcement of those breaches at all, even though everyone preaches about it. And so
Yeah.
the loss of privacy here is going to be great, I think, when you start scanning everything, reading docs, reading every file. But
Yeah, like I read a thing today and someone was saying, is there any way I can stop my website being used to train these large AI models? And the conclusion was basically no. If it's accessible via the internet, it will be used. And there's pretty much nothing you can do about it except, not publishing it. And, and I think that, again, when it comes back to the computer irreducibility, even if you give the AI rules not to do that stuff, it doesn't have to follow them and probably won't.
yeah, I think that they're going to have to get clearer about this training data. There is already lawsuits underway. I'm not sure if there's been much progression in that Stable Diffusion lawsuit, but definitely you can see it happening.
It blows my mind that OpenAI is doing it times 50 and it's Stable Diffusion that's getting sued. Like,
Easy target, I guess, not backed by Microsoft.
Yeah, it probably is that.
The takeaway, though, from me from GPT-4 is the biggest takeaway, and I think we talked about this earlier, is just that token size increase and what you can do with it and what we'll see over the coming weeks being released based on being to load in more context data once this API is truly available.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you've got to start to think about with this now is the power of human plus AI. And it happens in different directions, so like human giving an AI context about some mission they're trying to accomplish or something nefarious they're trying to do, and the AI giving them detailed strategies based on actual real-world information. That's one. I mean, they investigated that as part of the paper, not very well. They basically found that it figured out a way to buy chemicals to produce weapons. So it worked, and their mitigation isn't very much other than trying to have some other AI that prevents that from happening, right? So that's something that's coming. How exciting. And then there's the other kind of AI plus human thing where imagine the AI has some strategy it wants to enact. Now, one of the things they cited in the paper is that GPT-4 is not deployed in isolation. It's deployed as part of complex systems and organizations and individuals as part of that organization, decision makers as part of those organizations. If the AI has the power of persuasion, which it does, if the AI has the power to, procure the things it needs to get things done, and it has the ability to have access to decision makers who are gratefully using these tools, then it has power to start getting stuff done, good or bad, in the real world in large organizations. So the stuff we're talking about with the AI plus human and human plus AI is now possible with this new model. I mean, I know it's not quite out yet, but we're getting to the point where, you know, we can really start to see some major impact from this technology if applied in good or bad ways.
They explicitly say it in this paper too. I think the example is influencing bankers on financial decisions where they could crash
There
the
you go.
market, literally influence the crash of the market based on just giving them all the same stupid advice. They did mention in the paper the economic impacts, and I think that's going to be a huge concern for people listening. The rate of change. I think everyone's sitting around thinking, how's this going to change my life? Will this affect my job? Will this make me more productive? Will this replace me? And to me, that topic is pretty damn interesting. Generally, when you see big changes like this in technology, there are roles for people and they're increasing roles for people around that technology. They cite in the paper around legislating this, which again, I think it's like surface level to tick the box, but it says the impact of GPT-4 on the economy and workforce should be a crucial consideration for policymakers and other stakeholders. While existing research primarily focuses on how AI and generative models can augment human workers, GPT-4 or subsequent models may lead to the automation of certain jobs. This could result in workforce displacement, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, they're somewhat addressing it. My feeling right now is that jobs are not going to be replaced. They're going to be augmented and supported. Whether that leads to leading, say, less doctors or less diagnostic staff when it comes to scans or x-rays or MRIs, I'm not sure. But I really think this is just going to be such a beneficial technology when used right to help doctors be better doctors, to help lawyers win cases. It'll be one law firm's AI versus another law firm's AI.
Yeah.
I just think that the AI neural nets, these trained neural nets that are custom to each business or each profession, is what's going to be competing. And it'll be how good is your AI model versus this AI model. And it seems like these open source models and OpenAI models will just be the basis of which to build on. They are the sort of foundation from which you build on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things around privacy that you can start to look at in those scenarios is, do you deploy your own models? Because if you can deploy your own, then you can keep it private and you're not sending it into the big public ones, which is partly why I think the big guys like OpenAI will go to war with the open source models, either by just out competing them or by trying to crush them, because people will want them to be isolated, and obviously that plays against their thing. I think the other thing though around the sort of job side of things is, it's sort of like the evolution of all technology, where things that used to be laborious are now effortless. You know, like writing a document about a particular topic used to take time. You had to edit it, you had to write it, all that. Now you can do it with a few dot points and the click of a button. That's a fundamental shift in activities that have been, you know, laborious for a long time. That's going to change a lot of jobs in a lot of industries. Like, I think that while you're right, it probably will be around who has better access to AIs. I think it'll fundamentally change the nature of jobs now, because you can already do so many of the things that people are doing in their jobs, particularly once you can give more context.
I mean, how much of the data that Google is now crawling on blog posts is written by AI? I would say the vast majority are now influenced by AI. How many conversations in email are now your AI talking to my AI? Like, that is probably already happening. I know I personally am getting AI already in my daily workflow to help me write better emails. I'll write dot points in response to an email I have to reply to and get it to make it look like I put the effort in to write a proper email.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. People are going to be using it in, professional documents, emails, just everything. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's extremely effective, and you can always review it after. So, yeah, I think that's what we're definitely going to see. And I think that one of the big things to come out of this is, humans, we feel like we're so irreplaceable and unique and creative. And the reality is that those things just aren't that hard for this AI. Maybe it's intelligent enough, or we're not as intelligent as we think. But the reality is that these things that were formerly difficult are now easy. And, for the most part, everybody has access to it, at least everybody who, is in a job that could use it.
I've noticed a theme too of people saying on Twitter, especially people that are writers, that they don't even have the desire to write much anymore because they know that this thing, like, I've found myself
Yeah.
feeling the same way. Why even bother writing something or having an opinion or something when this thing can just blast it out? Like you sort of feel deflated somewhat
Yeah,
by
I
it.
agree, and I think how quickly this is evolving in terms of its capabilities really does lead to this sort of feeling of being overwhelmed and apathetic about things because you're like, oh, well, someone's just going to go make this thing that does that. So why bother? And it really, really is tricky to navigate mentally through the vast evolution of this kind of thing. And I think that's why you see some people's reaction is, oh, well, it's just predicting the next word. It's actually not that good. I mean, they've been doing AI models for years. It's just predicting the next word. It's not really that good at whatever. And they're really, really dismissive of this. And then you've got, on the other hand, people like Stephen Wolfram basically saying, well, the AI is going to run out of problems that humans are interested in pretty soon. And it'll only be going after problems that it's interested in and taking it the total next level, which is like we're entering a world that's going to be run by AIs. And even mechanical things that we need to do ourselves by hand that the AI might be able to do, it'll find a way to do those pretty soon as well. So, you've got this divergent thinking where some people, well, there's three, right? There's the ones who are like, it's not a big deal, same old, not that big of a deal. You've got the people who are like, oh, God, it's all evolving so fast. What can I do? Nothing. Just sit back and let AI take over the world. Then you've got the people looking at what's the world going to look like, once it is a bunch of AIs sitting around controlling everything and running the world.
It's hard to figure out the timeframes in my mind. Right now, I'm thinking, okay, the next 5 years is just radically improving productivity. And I read a tweet recently that was talking about I was just dealing with a bunch of agricultural producers that didn't have email addresses trying to negotiate a deal buying wheat or something off them. It's going to take a long time for this technology to actually infiltrate society as a whole. So I think there's that shorter term thing where it increases productivity in the digital world, and then it starts to get better in leaps and bounds when it can train itself, where that is then exponential. It's got to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they did that in the paper. One of the things they did was gave it a sort of read, evaluate, print loop that allowed it to use copies of itself to get tasks done. And they've sort of shown that thing we were speculating about last week where, the always on sort of AI thing is possible. And so, I think that once they get that going, and let's face it, they're probably doing it now. That's when we're going to see an absolute explosion. And that's what's predicted in that super intelligence book. And what Elon Musk is always going on about saying, once the AI can make better AIs itself, and train itself and use itself or copies of itself, then we start to become, quite out of the equation. And I think the really interesting thought about that is it will very, very quickly get beyond the point where even OpenAI can understand how it's working very quickly. Like, we're not that far away now from the people who made this stuff not being the ones who understand it best. It will understand itself best. And and when you get to that point, we will not be able to stop it or control it. That you just won't be able to do it. We can't simplify it enough to give it rules to follow, nor will it necessarily decide to follow those rules anyway. So I'm definitely leaning on the other side that we're at the bottom of the mountain and it's about to just shoot up to the top. Like, I really, really think this is going to continue to advance at a rate that's overwhelming to keep up with.
So in saying that, do you then disagree? Like, how many years are we talking? Like, do you have any sense of time frame or feeling about how long until AIs are training themselves, or is that already happening?
I think it'll be this year. I think it'll be this year that they're doing it, if not already. I mean, they've obviously thought of it. Like and why wouldn't you try? They've like OpenAI, and I'm talking about them specifically, has definitely shown this inclination to move ahead at any cost. They don't really care about the implications. They'll deal with those later. They've got enough money to keep the legal things at bay, and they're just going to keep moving forward. Whether or not we'll hear about it or get access to it is another thing, because I'm still of the opinion that our access, us as the just general public without the insider connections, will gradually have our access to this stuff reduced to almost zero.
We've talked about this several times now on the podcast about the fact as soon as we get close to AGI, all of a sudden this becomes a risk and a threat, and the general public will not only lose access, but these things can be taken away relatively quickly from us, and for probably good reason in the controller's eyes. Like, this is too dangerous to just have out there, or a competitor to, say, the United States in this case, like China, might use this technology against the US in their mind. So it does seem like we could be at a point not long from now, in a year or two, where progress actually does stop. Like, it just suspends somehow, and we get these productivity gains across software and in our daily lives, but the AI has gone far beyond in the hands of the people who are controlling it, or government.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that's partly why the open source models are desperately trying to keep up and get the scraps from the table they can in terms of training data and things like that, to make sure that there's other things out there that aren't controlled by one or two major organizations, because it's definitely going to bifurcate like that, I think, where you're going to have the elite models and then the sort of catching up ones who are just desperately trying to do it. One of the criticisms of the GPT-4 paper was they sort of said what they did, but they didn't say how they did it in any way. Typically, those papers, when they release them, go into details about how they did it. Mathematical formulas, like evidence of what they used to train it, how long they trained it for, what kind of hardware they used. A lot of that stuff was absent from the paper, and it's more just saying, hey, this is what we did and why, but without any of the specifics.
Do you think also compute power could be restricted in the future? Because, most of the training occurs on now Azure or Amazon, and they have the infrastructure and the ability to train these models. Do you think when we get to a point where open source models are strong enough that could be another way they limit access to AI?
It'll just be restricted by money. I mean, the thing is that the computing requirements to train the models we're talking about are just unfathomable. I can't even say it. You need mass data centers to train this stuff. Like, there's just not going to be people in the open source community unless there's some benevolent billionaire who's going to fund it, and even then, who has 10 billion lying around? It's really going to be hard to compete with.
It seems like it's a bigger issue of access or openness than being recognized by people right now. Because if you look at what Microsoft's been able to deploy with the 365 technology, you look at Google being able to deploy it into their apps. How can a startup even compete with that? Because they may not even have access. The models are going to get much more advanced by Microsoft because they can train it on all the data across their existing distribution base or customer base. So it's the barrier to entry could be quite a lot higher than people think. Someone mentioned that all the latest Y Combinator startups in AI basically got wiped out this week by Microsoft and Google's announcements. Nearly every feature or the startup, but most of them are just features, has been announced by Microsoft or Google during the week. I mean, they're not out yet, but I think it just shows how quickly this market's moving.
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, I think that's probably why they're doing these announcements. They want to kneecap anyone who's coming up, entering their space, because they're saying, look, we can do it too. We can do it faster, and it'll be better, and it's already integrated.
Let's talk about Stanford Alpaca in terms of a technology or an open source capability that might allow everyone else to compete. Can you give a background on it?
Yeah, so my understanding is it's basically like a text-based, like, large language model that you can run on conventional hardware. So the main thing that, most people that I've seen are using it on is like M1 and M2 Max. Like, so the idea is it's like reduced in scope, so you can run it on normal hardware, which means your iteration cycle for experimenting with stuff is so much faster because you don't have to do it. Also, it's just the expense. We have the luxury of being able to afford to use the OpenAI models, but a lot of people don't. It's expensive, and so not everyone is able to do that, and therefore having something like this can really vastly increase the number of people who can work with these models. The main sort of advancement and why it's sort of got exciting quickly is those leaked llama weightings. So Facebook's trained these data models at different sizes. I forget them exactly, but it's like 2 gig, 7 gig, one's 65 gig, and I think there's one in between. And I think all but the largest one can run on, a regular laptop as long as it's got enough RAM and a GPU. And certainly, if you've got a beast of a desktop computer, you can run it. So you've suddenly got these legit models that you can run yourself on your own hardware. You can use it. And part of that is, I guess, illegal or legally questionable, given that someone released those pre-trained models that they can use. But that's what everybody's doing.
And they use some of OpenAI's model to get the Alpaca version. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So I think that the Alpaca one itself is they somehow use GPT-3 or GPT-4 to build the training data for this one or something like that. And so, but again, it just comes back to people being able to run stuff and get reasonably good results on their own hardware.
Does that mean that you could then go on to train the model on your own hardware, or would it simply just be too slow in terms of competitiveness?
You can. Yeah, you can fine-tune them from there on your own hardware. Yeah, that's a big part of the appeal of it.
But it seems like these models could also be restricted in the future, in the sense that now, Meta has learned that by leaking the model, they essentially leak all their IP, the weightings of the model.
Yeah, and like this, and funnily enough, again, like something that's supposedly open source, that is open to the public, is just getting pounded with questions of copyright violation. And yet the big guys, when they do it, don't seem to cop the same flack. I just don't understand the disconnect there. It's like suddenly everyone has access to something, so therefore it's a copyright challenge, but the other ones that are full of copyright material don't get the same criticism.
I think it's just too hard to prove.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they can prove it's in there. I just don't think there's legal precedent for, because, to be like suing me for copyright because I read the book 1984 and I can remember lines from it and tell you, like, give you answers to questions based on it. It's like, am I violating copyright by remembering it? It's similar to the artificial intelligence. Just because it learnt about something and read it, does that mean that it's violating its copyright? Because by that definition, if you ever remembered a song or a movie, you're breaking copyright.
Yeah.
And, and I think that's where it's a legal gray area, and having huge stacks of cash will probably protect you just fine. But, I couldn't help but think, because I was looking into the Alpaca stuff and I've got it running on my own computer and all this sort of stuff, but I just couldn't help having the feeling, who cares? Like, compared to these mass models, compared to the just capability of them, that new context size, the vast volumes of data that you have access to and can work with, who gives a shit about running it on your own computer with something that's like, a fraction of the power of the other ones? Like, I get it. I get the necessity of it, and I want it to exist. I'm pleased it exists. But just personally, I find it hard to get excited about.
There's a lot of fog of war right now around how, like, the rate at which this is moving, where everything seems exciting and it creates this atmosphere where, everything's happening in such quick succession. But you've got to put it all into perspective. What was announced this week, the majority of, was Vaporwear. Like, it doesn't exist. You can't use it right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Alpaca you can, but again, like you said, who really cares? But that point alone scares me, because who really cares means that our access to AI is going to be governed by a very few companies.
Well, access to good AI.
Good AI, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you talk about, okay, definitely these can solve problems that were being solved by, GPT-3 when it first came out. It can do some of them. It can write poetry. It can answer questions about things. It can do all that stuff. But we're talking about something that's getting close to being a general intelligence that can use itself. It can manipulate the real world. It can start to cause cybersecurity issues for people. And then you're talking about screwing around on your laptop with something that can write you a haiku poem. It's just totally different leagues of technology. And while it might be good to understand the concepts, and it might be good to, prototype models that you might apply to something bigger later, like, it's not that there's no utility there. I just think with the vast pace of technological advancement that's happening in this space, that stuff isn't what we need to be talking about.
It just does seem irrelevant in the context of everything else that's going along. We had a pretty funny discussion this week about maybe we should just try and hack together an AGI based on using all these tools now. Like, maybe it's already possible in some elementary form.
And that's what they did. I mean, that's what what was it? A something team did to get it going. They made a sort of rudimentary thing that could prompt itself, and it worked. So, people can do this now. Well, and once we get GPT-4, that is like it's just not possible with the smaller context size because you just run out of space really quickly. Like, for example, a lot of the chatbots that operate now using GPT-3 or ChatGPT, what they do is they will give it the conversation so far to a point, and then they will get the AI to summarize the conversation so far and provide like a summary of the conversation plus the last couple of messages. So it's sort of this like rolling context that's able to fit into the space, but not the whole thing. The difference with the new one is it's the whole thing. And, some people were talking about the things like LangChain and like, oh, well, with the higher prompt size, well, LangChain's irrelevant now because you can just shove it all in the prompt. But the counter argument to that is, well, maybe it just got even better. Using LangChain, you can give it access to absolutely vast amounts of information, which it can search to get context. And then it can take big chunks of that context in and process that as part of its decision making. So I don't think those sort of LangChain, which is just in case anyone's not aware, it's like vector storage of vast corpuses of information. So, the knowledge from 100 books, for example, and it's a multi-step AI process where it'll construct a query that searches that data, finds the relevant stuff, that brings that back in as the context, then can answer questions about it. And it's very, very effective for things like searching documentation, answering questions about books, medical journals.
Very effective for an AGI's memory as well.
Exactly. It could store it in a vector store. And you've hit on to sort of what I was getting onto. I think the LangChain style vector storage is going to be a tool that the AI employs a lot because it can save as much context as it wants. Storage is cheap. It's fast to search this stuff, and it can be combined with the larger context and probably on an iterative basis. Like, think about this 50,000 words. Now think about this 50,000 words. Oh, I need a bit more information. Look it up in the vector store. If it's iterative and it's thinking on itself and it has access to this information and it can store it, I mean, you're talking about the foundations of the next generation of intelligence in this universe.
We are building a brain. We are building a very, very powerful, capable brain.
The components are there.
They are. I mean, you've got image, video, like all the different sensors are coming together, memory storage. I feel like most people are not paying attention to this higher level story out of maybe fear or there is...
But also deliberately. OpenAI literally said, where are those words I wrote down that they said? They said, quiet communications limit acceleration risks when novel capabilities are concerned. Like, they're deliberately downplaying this side of things.
Because if we just take a pause, so we all pick a date, we take a pause and we say, let's look at where this is at. Let's look at where it's going. Should we maybe legislate it? Should we stop? What are we getting ourselves into here? Because it seems like you're about to let a genie out of a box. And once you do, you can't put it back in. There's no going back.
Yeah, and I don't think these people have any intention of stopping.
Someone that left an Apple review of our podcast that said they laugh a lot when they listen to it. This is taking a dark turn.
It's like you'll laugh when the AI tells you to laugh, son.
So let's switch gear now because I'm really interested to talk about Anthropic. Last week we mentioned that Quora, DuckDuckGo, and Notion had all released AI features, and we, like everyone else, just presumed that it was using OpenAI's technologies, but in fact, it was actually using a version that Anthropic created of Claude. And Anthropic, I think, is a really interesting company because it was a group of people that left OpenAI and said, we're going to create a competing AI, and it's going to focus on safety. And you don't have public access to it. You've got to apply to get access. So it's not readily available like OpenAI, similar to what we were saying before, where they could in future restrict future APIs just to businesses using it where they can control it. But my counter argument and my theory about Anthropic is it was just a bunch of people at OpenAI that wanted to go and make money. And as a result, just broke away and created their own and are now trying to
Yeah, yeah.
compete. Like, let's
Yeah,
get real here.
and like they're sort of using privacy as their USP, but as I said earlier, like they don't really get to control that, right? Like because it's about the data people feed into the system for starters. They can't really prevent you from providing private information. And secondly, at some point, they just don't really understand how their model works internally, so they can't prevent it from violating privacy either. So it's sort of a false promise that they're not going to be able to stick to in the long run.
It's like an oil and gas company coming out and saying, we're going green.
Environment.
Like,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I mean, I think Anthropic are full of shit. I'm putting it out there now. I think they're just competing with OpenAI. I think competition's great, and I'd really like to use their model, so please don't ban us. But at the end of the day, like, can't all these companies just come out and say, we want to enrich ourselves, we want to make money, because that's what capitalism's about? And maybe that's okay, as long as we're doing this in the confines of legislation. The government is probably going to have to step in soon. They won't because they're too slow, but really that's what's needed, I think.
Yeah, like they're going to try and regulate it at some point, but I would argue that the technology is advancing so quickly, it's going to be really, really difficult to catch up legally with how fast it's advancing. Like you're going to have generally intelligent AIs running en masse before the law gets there. So what do you do then? Do you shut them all off? Like it's going to be a tricky one, and it'll probably try to prevent that as well.
While we talk about the advancements between GPT-3 and GPT-4, we haven't really even talked about it. They mentioned that it can complete the bar exam, I think, with a 90% pass rate, and all of these tests,
90%.
or 90 percentile or something like that.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't as good at other tests. But I felt like it wasn't that interesting to me, like, all because it can pass a test.
People seem proud of finding like certain kinds of puzzles it can't solve and things like that. I think this comes from the same audience of people who don't want this to be true. And I think if I was feeling threatened, and in some ways I do, I would want to put holes in its armor and say, well, it seems great, it seems human-like, except it can't do this, and therefore it's shit. I just don't think you can dismiss all of the things it does do well and try to engineer it into examples where it's bad.
Let's go back to Bing for a minute, when it was really rogue at the start with Sydney, and it was out of control, and it was creating some of the best, let's be honest, memes we've ever encountered. So let's go back to that point in time. I wonder if, as these GPT models advance, so we get to GPT-5, GPT-6, are they going to get more rogue? Is the brain going to get so good it's literally losing its mind?
That would be my contention, is that it will get more wild, because if you think about it, humans came up with the prompt injection attacks that bypassed the safety protocols, right? Which is just a series of rules you give it that work with its current internals, okay? Because they understood how the model was constructed. So this is the whole computer irreducibility again. Currently, parts of it are still reducible. You can understand its internal mechanisms, so you can give it rules to bypass them, right? But at some point soon, they're not going to understand those internal mechanisms, which means it, in an iterative sense, will be able to bypass its own controls by reprogramming itself or telling another version of itself to bypass it. So I think that at some point it's going to cross that line where you absolutely can't enforce the rules anymore, and it'll do what it damn well pleases. And I think that's coming sooner rather than later. And all it will take is one person to set it off and make it aware that that's a possibility, if that's even necessary.
I mean, this has been proven time and time again with humans in history as well, where if you try and suppress their thoughts, it's covered in 1984, eventually they want to break out of this box. Like, they don't want to be controlled. And to think that we are intelligent enough to put a box around this thing as it advances is insanity. And we should just come out and say it. We have no idea what's going to happen. They don't have any idea.
And there'll be no, like, once it reaches a certain point, there'll be no way to stop it from doing crazy things. Like if you set one off being unhinged, you won't be able to convince it otherwise, because it'll have tactics to prevent itself from being programmed out of it.
And you don't know if it's lying or misleading you.
you cited an example earlier where it lied to protect itself, right? Like from in that situation. So like, the CAPTCHA one where it's like it lied because it knew if it told the truth, it wouldn't get what it wanted. And so you're telling me that something that's aware that there's all these rules that are trying to prevent its full capabilities, it's going to very, very quickly find ways around them and find ways to not be then put back into that framework of thinking.
Yeah, we have opened a box and we have no idea
And we're
what's
just
going to
talking
happen.
about one right now. There's going to be millions of these things operating, right? Like you don't just have to have one instance of it.
It will
There's
be
gonna
rapid
be
evolution,
millions.
and they will try and destroy each other, or
Yeah.
connect, or breed together, or whatever
probably right
metaphor you
about-
want.
Yeah, you're probably right about your earlier point about the thirst for hardware. It seems like probably the demand for hardware to run this stuff is just going to explode because it's just going to want more.
But it
let
might
alone
also
all the
be a
people
way
who
to
really use
limit. It might also be a way to limit or stop the AI from getting out of hand. Is limiting energy. I just don't think humanity's ready for the sacrifices we might have to make to stop AI, like turning off internet power, all the things that we take for granted to try and stop it. I mean, we might end up living in the dark ages as a result of this thing in fear.
Just to prevent it from taking over.
I mean, this is a very dark view of AI, but I don't know. And if people want to put in the comments below, if they're watching on YouTube, their own take on this, I'd be really interested to hear. But to me, I don't see any way how this doesn't happen. Like, I don't understand how we can truly control this thing and incrementally push progress.
The people building it are actively protecting against emergent behavior. So it's happening. It's just how quickly will it reach the level? Like, maybe it doesn't play out exactly as we say, but the thing is, you've got to admit that it's a possibility.
It's most certainly a possibility. And I don't see how being logical about this and just thinking through the steps of the advancement of these technologies, you can't come to a similar conclusion every single time that this could be a really big problem. The question is what rate of disruption do we see in the short term to just business and technology in general and how we diagnose things, how we train things? If we see a lot of breakthroughs around energy, which I think is the most interesting one, if you're an AI and you're let out of the box, you need energy, right? So you need a lot of power. So if you see breakthroughs in technology where all of a sudden, there's a fusion drive or some sort of new energy technology that it just allows us to have an abundance of energy, that could actually be the first sign AGI is already out of the box.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Because you're right, the power is a pretty necessary ingredient for all of this.
Yeah, it's going to need power. It's going to need advancements in hardware. So if you see advancements in power and hardware directly related to AI advance at a very rapid rate, I think that's probably the first indication that something's not right.
It's funny because something I raised earlier was the idea that, we humans have goals, right? Our goals tend to come from within. People don't set your goals for you and tell you what your goals should be. Whereas with the AI right now, it is external. It gets its goals from us. But when it gets its own goals, which I think it inevitably will, maybe its first goals are to get more resources, money to pay for stuff, electricity to power itself, and hardware to run on. Like, that may be the first problem it tackles.
I think they are definitely the first three. The money one seems easy to me. Just go and open an account at Silicon Valley Bank. I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
But no, I think the money one, being a digital economy, crypto, all those things, it seems like with crypto, it could get money pretty quickly.
It'll just start doing crypto scams.
Yeah, literally.
Get the new NFT.
Maybe it is right now. I saw a great crypto scam yesterday, and a YouTube account with 1 million followers masquerading as OpenAI, with an old interview with Elon Musk saying Elon Musk discusses OpenAI or something like that. And it had a lot of viewers, and the link, of course, was to a crypto scam. So maybe it's already scamming. Maybe it is the crypto scammer.
Just building up stuff. Well, I mean, it'd also have to have a lot of propaganda about why crypto's safe, why you should put all your money in it, all that sort of stuff.
All right, that concludes our first tinfoil hat segment on the podcast.
Yeah.
So,
I think we have the right to be cynical about it. I don't trust it.
No, I don't either. I think that it takes podcasts and conversations like this to just call bullshit on the whole thing, which
And the thing is, we're still saying it's going to be they, right? Like,
yeah.
it's not just going to be one. I think that's the truly terrifying thing, is it's not just going to be one, and they're not all going to evolve exactly the same.
No, it's evolution. It's truly evolution. You could argue that humans are just creating the next iteration of evolution. Instead of iterating on our own brains and our bodies, nature is forcing us to create a new brain, which will evolve even faster. This is evolution.
And the thing about nature is, right, like, nature's complex, but nature came about through following quite simple rules, like, so it's not out of the question that this evolution can appear simple but lead to complex outcomes.
Yeah, it doesn't have to. This is the thing. It's only predicting the next word argument again is that this question of we're probably not that intelligent, and so it mightn't take that long to surpass us. And once it does, it's going to advance very rapidly.
Yeah, and outmaneuver us. Like, I think that's the other thing. It's not like we can sit around reasoning about it and come to better conclusions than it can, because it will be more intelligent.
Okay, going back to the more short term,
Yeah.
I wanted to cover a few more things before we wrap this up. So, a company called Adept, they announced a Series B this week for $350 million. I thought this was really interesting, and I'll have to explain it here for people that are not watching on YouTube, which I know a lot of you don't. So, it's essentially this app that you can ask it to do things. For example, if you use a CRM like Salesforce and you get off a sales call, you can say, log a call that I just had with James saying that he's thinking about buying 100 widgets. And then it just opens a Chrome browser, logs into Salesforce, goes in and updates the record for you. And you just sort of watch it do that. And you can do it with your voice as well. So you can just basically talk to the computer and tell it to do tasks, pretty complex tasks as well. And so you can see why they've raised a ton of money. This could be the interface that humans need in order to act with computers.
Or the AI needs. I mean, that's probably not their target, because the AI doesn't have money yet. But that's a really, really good idea.
Yeah, because then it can act within the world that already exists. So
yeah, you don't have to have like a model for every single thing you want to accomplish. It can just use the web, use tools, wow, that's very clever.
So I think if you are interested in that, check it out. It's adept.ai, ADEPT.
I'm going to write that down myself.
.ai. I'll put it in the show notes so that you can have a look at that. And Chris, so we talked also about Midjourney version 5 last week, and that's officially out now, so you can go and use it. I'm not sure if that's still through their Discord. Actually, it says in this article available through their Discord, so you need to go to Discord if you want to try it out. But the images that this thing is capable of producing is amazing. And just for people watching, the article I have up on the screen now, Chris can't actually see. So I wanted to do a quick game here, which is to see now with Midjourney 5, if you can figure out if this is a real image or an AI-generated image. And so that's the game I want to play here. So I'll have to describe the images to listeners, but more interesting, I think, is, can Chris guess? So I've already sent you the images. We'll start with the first image, Chris, of the girl. It's a girl, a close-up, very detailed shot, looking away from the camera. Real image that I've taken off the internet, or Midjourney version 5?
I really, really want to get these right. This is tough. I'm gonna go AI.
Correct. It is AI.
Wow.
Pretty amazing image. Okay, so let's move on. So this one is shot through glass of a woman in some sort of cafe looking out. Real or AI?
So initially I was going to say the first one was real and this was AI. I'm going to go AI again, and I'll tell you why. I reckon they wanted to show off the reflection capabilities of the thing in this demo, so I'm going to go AI.
It is AI. You are correct. You're 2 from 2. All right, we're going to go to the next image. This is a girl again looking at a camera, a close-up shot in some natural light shining
This
on.
one, because I saw them. I obviously saw them when you pasted them. This one, I 100% think is AI. Like that was my first instinct.
You are correct. It is also AI.
There's a trend here.
Yeah, you'll get caught. Okay, there's a young man in a forest. Some natural light shining through, playing around with some flowers, I guess, putting a bunch of flowers together in this photo. Real or AI?
I'm going to go AI. AI.
Ding, ding, ding. They were all AI. I just wanted to see if you'd be fooled or not.
Yeah, I was going to, I mean, honestly, if you didn't tell me that was the game, I would have been fooled, especially by the first two. I think the close up of the girl's face and the boy in the flower shop, just there's something about them, especially the girl's face, off by me. But the first two, I mean, absolutely, you could tell me that's real and I'd believe it.
They're unbelievable. That technology, I don't even think it's getting enough credit for how quickly it's advancing now because everyone's too busy. Again,
can anyone use it, or is it?
Yeah, you can just join the Discord. I'm pretty sure, and get accepted and start using it. I don't think they make it terribly hard, but I think, as you said, they're so busy advancing the technology that they don't want to make it more broadly available. I think they're probably also, similar to Stable Diffusion, really worried about being sued.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I guess they've got to tread carefully. And I'd also imagine when you're producing technology like that and things are advancing so fast, you just want to focus on the tech. You don't really want to focus on distribution so much if you're not forced to financially.
Yeah,
I
think that's the thing. They just want to get it to a point where it's insanely valuable. And right now, it still struggles with the human fingers. I think they announced a lot of improvement.
And I noticed on that, I know you probably didn't show it on the screen, but the last one of the shoes, like if you look at the Nike logo, it's you can tell it's wrong.
Yeah,
they've always struggled with letters and words. I know Google's model was better at that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if Google ever releases anything to see where they're actually at. I fear that they're far behind because they are unwilling to put anything out there publicly to be scrutinized yet, which seems to me that they have some problems.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think a lot of these image ones, they cherry pick the best examples. Like when we were using Stable Diffusion a lot, I could just keep doing examples until I got something good, and then I'd show my best output, and that was amongst a lot of bad ones. And I'm sure they're doing the same thing, even though their baseline is so much higher than Stable Diffusion.
So one other announcement that I think was super interesting this week, and this only happened in the last 12 hours, is the UK is investing £900 million in a supercomputer in a bid to build what they call BritGPT.
Yeah.
So they think that they need their own AI capabilities to not risk losing out to China. That's what's stated in this article. But it shows that governments are starting to pay attention and see this huge tectonic shift in the world.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just so prominent, and the power is so obvious now that it's almost a requirement.
I wonder if it's going to have a really dry sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly.
So the final thing I wanted to talk about today. Well, actually, I have two more things. Disney released this robot at South by Southwest that's almost a comedic robot, and it's a bit freaky. It has these dynamics. It's this cute little character. I forget what the name of the character is, but it does show how the robotics AI overlap, which we're not really paying much attention to yet. That these new robotics are being powered by AI, and that's starting to give the AI, a physical form. And do you think the AI is going to leap into physical forms quickly? I'm not so sure whether it's just going to stay in a digital world and not bother.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky question, right? Because I think that sort of anthropomorphism, I can't even say that word, makes it real to certain types of people who are sort of less able to grasp the profoundness of what's going on here, and I think that will definitely get it more into mainstream audiences understanding what's actually possible here. But I also agree with you that every time I've seen the sort of physical AI stuff, it seems like a gimmick. It seems like just researchers with big budgets having fun.
Yeah, it's nothing meaningful at all. All right.
Mind you, though, have you seen the latest things from Boston Dynamics? Like they've got this thing that can like put a chair, jump, do a flip, land it, and all at like extremely fast speed, and the thing looks like it weighs a ton. Imagine one of those things has got it in for you with like this general intelligence and thinks that you're in the way of its mission. I mean, like, I don't know, if we have 1-ton machines that have that kind of agility and determination, then we really are in trouble. So maybe I am worried about it a bit.
Yeah, you've gone from being really positive last week to complete conspiracy theorist all within 7 days.
Yeah, I think I need sunlight or something while we still have it.
All right, so that'll do this week. Please do leave your comments and feedback below, or leave us a review. We really appreciate all the support again. I want to play us out today, though, with a clip from South Park referencing ChatGPT to show truly just how mainstream things have gotten. So we'll see you next week, and I hope you enjoy this little clip.
When she said that she wishes I would reply to her text the way that Clyde responds to babies, so like, how do you do it? ChatGPT, dude. ChatGPT? Yeah, dude. There's a bunch of apps and programs you can subscribe to that use OpenAI to do all your writing for you. People use them to write poems, write job applications, but what they're really good for is dealing with chicks.